Yeah.
Go Thunder. All right, welcome back to the Wednesday Word Wad. I'm here with Mike again, per usual, and we are going to talk about debating, arguing, agreeing to disagreeing in a respectful way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start off by saying I think that when it comes to fitness, nutrition, health in general, there's a big emotional attachment to it, so people tend to get married to different ideas and ways about going about doing things, and I think that with them getting married to those ideologies and whatnot, that they tend to close their mind to other possibilities. And I guess we're just here to kind of talk about how to discuss these topics or whatever. I know this is a big topic usually at like holidays, family holidays and family parties. For me personally, there's always some sort of question that comes up relating to working out or nutrition, and then there's always friendly kind of banter back and forth. But yeah, we're going to talk about how to do it in a respectful way.
Yeah.
Mike, you want to kind of give your 2 cents on how you would go about it if you came across a client, a member, a family member, your spouse, whether you guys disagree on something related to, and this doesn't just mean for health and wellness. This could kind of carry over to everything.
Yeah, I think this is a good topic. So I'm very outcome minded, but I'm usually less emotionally driven, which I think helps. So what I mean by that is 2 people could disagree about something, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's nutrition, and there's in some way beauty in disagreement because that creates tension, and tension usually creates growth and getting closer to the truth.
I think it creates growth, maybe not in the moment in time, but potentially in the future.
Yeah,
like better understanding when it comes to future like disagreements.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to have the right mindset and headspace whenever entering into a discussion where both parties disagree. If you go into it with the mindset of, I need to convince this person, usually that's out of self-ego.
Yeah.
You want to be seen as right. You want to be validated in your own intelligence and your own identity of a human being that's competent. Mm-hmm. What I challenge people to do is enter into a point where you want to help the person get closer to the truth in a way where you're not hated after. Because if you say things that are mean, they're going to hate, and they're going to be less likely to listen. You see that oftentimes with politics now, with the Republican Party, the Democrat Party. There's probably a lot of things that both parties agree on, and maybe parties would change their mind better on certain perspectives or policies if topics were approached differently.
Yeah.
There's an example in the Bible that I really like. When I was a youth pastor, I used this example.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Daniel?
You asking me?
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with anything.
Daniel
really
in the Old Testament. So yeah. Daniel, a little backstory on this dude. This dude was a tough mofo. So when he was 16 years old, all the Israelites, 75% of them, were taken into captivity. You have like King Nebuchadnezzar, you have the Babylonian Empire. So 75% or so are taken to the Babylonian Empire as slaves. Now Daniel, he's only 16, he's smart. He does well on the exams, he does well on the tests, and he kind of rises through the system even though he's not Babylonian per se. And the first instance where he gets into a situation where he doesn't want to compromise his beliefs, he doesn't want to compromise what he thinks is true, was when he had his first encounter with the food that the Babylonians were eating. So the Babylonians, they didn't eat kosher. Now for Daniel, based on what he believed, he thought honoring God was eating kosher, but he also wanted to appeal to authority. He wanted to appeal to the individuals that were over him. So the person that was his boss said, you have to eat this way. And Daniel's like, well, I'd rather eat kosher. And now the guy that was over him had a really good point. The guy over him said, look, if you don't eat this way, it's my head that's going to be taken, and I really don't want to get murdered. So Daniel said, all right, well, that's a fair point. Let me eat kosher for just 1 week. And if I perform better in my physical tasks and my mental tasks, if I appear healthier, then we roll with what I'm going for, because that's going to create a good outcome for you, because I'm going to create a better work product. You're going to look better. Your boss is going to be happy with you. And the guy goes, okay, I guess that's fair. You get 1 week. Mm-hmm. No one will notice in a week if Daniel's eating kosher or not kosher. Mm-hmm. Daniel eats kosher. He's healthier. He performs better. He's able to kind of get his way while also helping his boss. Mm-hmm. So what's in it for the other party when you're in a debate for them to take your side? What's going to benefit them? And I like using that angle when approaching these topics. So if we use the example of nutrition, artificial sweeteners is oftentimes a very emotionally charged subject, as most nutrition subjects are. I'll lead with, well, wouldn't it be nice to be able to have something sweet and delicious that doesn't compromise your health? Let's just pretend that artificial sweeteners do not compromise your health. They taste good, right? Most people will say, yeah, they taste good. Yeah. And then from there, you've opened up a discussion where now they think they can gain something, the ability to drink artificial sweeteners without fear. From there, once they see that there's something in it for them, then you can maybe dive into the literature. Before doing so, I like to pose the question just to kind of figure out where their headspace is at and purposely create some cognitive dissonance. So instead of getting right into the literature after starting with the emotional question of artificial sweeteners taste good, I'll then say, what makes you believe that they're not good for your health? What makes you believe that they're harmful? And usually people will start stumbling. They'll say, well, they're just bad because it's fake, and they'll kind of run into the natural fallacy. Yeah. Where anything that's not natural is harmful, anything that's natural is good, which we've covered on a previous video. Yeah. So you start there, and then you say, okay, so yeah, it's not natural. Why is that bad? And then they might say a statement, and then you say, okay, what makes you believe that they cause cancer? What type of data do you have to support that? Or maybe let's look at it together, because that's interesting, and I want to know. So I'm going in more so letting the other party express their beliefs, but not just expressing their beliefs, expressing their whys. And when people start to express their whys, that's when they start to really question or think about what they believe, instead of just parroting blanket statements. They start to critically think. So we want to get people, we start with emotion, but then if we leave it in emotion, we're kind of done for it. From there, we want them to kind of go into logic and critical thinking. And we want them to do the critical thinking. From there, most good people, even if they disagree, will say, well, what makes you believe your perspective? And then that's where you have an opening to share your perspective and hopefully get close to the truth. Now, personally, I'd rather be wrong, and I've been wrong many times in discussions and debates. I remember we in college, I thought diet soda was bad. I thought that artificial sweeteners spiked insulin. And the professor goes, well, why do you believe that? And I go, I don't know, I read it in a magazine. And then, of course, he kindly said, well, if your insulin went up, but you don't have it, and on the presence of blood glucose going up, that's going to put you into a coma, and you would die. And like, oh, I guess, yeah. That makes sense. So critically think, get them to critically think, and then from there you can kind of look at the pathways and maybe go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that to have it in a respectful way, like for example, recently an incident happened at the CrossFit Games. A athlete died during an event, and a friend of and I had a conversation, and we're both, I would say we're both pretty emotionally intelligent. We respect each other's opinion, typically agree on most things, but this thing we didn't agree on. And we were going back and forth maybe a couple texts, maybe 3 or 4 each, about why one another was either wrong in the incident or about like what happened. And we mutually agreed that like we're not going to come to a conclusion to like agree with the other person. So I literally said, I don't see this going anywhere. Let's agree to disagree. Love you, dude. And then that was literally it. And there was like this mutual kind of respect for each other, where like you said, you ask the person why, we explain it and talk about it, and usually that forces people to kind of expose their why their reasoning may be wrong or not critically thought out. And over text, we were able to both kind of talk about it. And since it was such a severe situation during the CrossFit Games and there were multiple variables, both sides kind of had both sides were critically thought out and had good points. So depending on which way you took the situation, we were both technically right and we were both technically wrong in the sense, but we both agreed that like we're not going to come to a conclusion and we're not going to let this incident like come between us as friends and our respect for one another. So to kind of go off your point, like usually when people not only explain why they think some way, but verbally say it out loud, it gets them to think a little bit more about their their viewpoint.
Yeah, if you're questioning a suspect in a case and you watch Dateline or you watch any of those police shows, the cops, all they do is ask questions. They're just trying to get the person to talk. And then eventually when people are talking, they can start to see the validity in their own statements or their lack thereof.
Yeah.
And that is really important. Now, I also think it's important, we do live in a society where everyone wants to be liked. And that can be a detriment in some of these discussions.
Yeah.
So an example would be compromise. When you compromise on something that is black and white, after you compromise, if you meet each other in the middle, neither of you are probably right. Or maybe, in some cases, you might actually be right with compromise because maybe you were both wrong.
Yeah.
And maybe there was a third answer that was correct. But I would say the statistical chance of that is lower.
Yeah.
Than maybe one party in the discussion being more right. So compromising can be risky. You see it in business oftentimes where I think Bezos, think what you want about him, but he talked about this. He will never compromise. He will go with whoever appears more confident or whoever appears to be closer to the truth. He also will go with the answer that is non-permanent. If there's if it's a two-door problem and you go through one door but you can still retract and go through the other door, he'll probably choose that option over the option if you go through the other door first but you can't go back. And from an emotional standpoint, use that in your discussions. If you go too hardcore with someone, too emotionally driven, you might not be able to have that same discussion again. You might have blocked off that person's reception to that topic to the point where they'll just become a parrot of their current knowledge base of the information.
Makes sense.
So I kind of tied that a little bit indirectly, but I
Yeah.
think that makes a big difference when you're having these discussions.
Yeah.
Most discussions where someone's held on to a belief for a very long time, their mind is not going to be changed in a single discussion. So you want to use the discussion to maybe set up a future discussion and to get closer to the truth.
How long did it take you to change your mind, I guess, how would you say it? Kind of, just change your mind about diet sodas and artificial sweeteners. It probably wasn't that one time that professor asked you why.
No, but the professor, what he did was, notice he asked me a question. He goes, why? So then I wanted to defend my answer better. So then I started looking at PubMed. And when I started going through the research, I was like, wait, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It probably took, I probably changed, after that conversation, it was pretty quick. Because I dived right into the research. But there were other instances where it took me a bit longer. I used to believe that carbs were fattening,
Okay.
and that took me a couple of years. I had people tell me no, and they explain why, but it didn't click initially.
Yeah.
But I kept reading. I kept trying to, in my head, create a folder where which side holds more literature supporting it, which side holds better literature supporting it. And then eventually I think I'm correct now. But
Yeah.
I'm sure there's going to be stuff in the future where I believe to this day right now that I'll change my mind on later.
Are there anything that you're kind of skeptical that you think you'll end up changing your mind?
Nothing. I mean, we're in a very specific industry, so
Yeah.
potentially,
You can go outside of fitness.
yeah, well, in our industry, I would say potentially the relationship of volume versus intensity. I used to be a hardcore intensity guy, then I was more of a volume guy. Now I'm kind of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I was similar in a sense. I remember 2018. I thought that it was possible to like obviously build as much muscle as possible and lean out. So I tried keto,
Yeah.
and I lasted probably 2.5, 3 days. And I remember because there's a specific cabinet in my parents' house that had all the bread, like
Mhm.
tortillas, pitas, bread for sandwiches and whatnot. And while I was making my eggs for the third breakfast in a row, I could smell the bread through the cabinet, and my mouth was watering, and I couldn't go longer. I've done it probably 3 or 4 times, trying lower carb, and as soon as I see bread, my mouth starts to water.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm not gonna fight this anymore. And then that's when it turned into learning about like, oh, you need to eat more to put on.
What's
muscle.
interesting though too is it started with an emotion.
Yeah.
It started with an emotion. You emotionally wanted the bread, but logically, you thought that bread was gonna be fattening.
Yeah.
So your goals mattered more to you.
Yeah.
But because there was a strong enough emotion towards it, that helped you kind of delve into the literature a little bit more and see that you could eat bread and put on muscle and get shredded and jacked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also felt like super flat
Yeah.
just eating fat and protein. So then every single time I would introduce like carbs back into, and I was eating like 50 grams or less. So every single time I added more than that, 150, 200, 250, whatever I was eating, I felt fuller and like less bloated.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew the water was like in the muscle belly, not just like in the skin.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm better in the gym. I feel better. I'm not watering at the mouth when I see
Yeah.
food. I've never experienced anything like that before because I'm not like a food. I love food, but I'm not like, I don't like live to eat.
Yeah.
But I also don't eat to live. I'm like somewhere in the middle. And when I experienced that, I was like, I don't know what is going on here. I was so confused, and that's what kind of forced me to kind of learn about it more. So
Yeah.
being open to prove yourself wrong, I think is important.
Yeah, and view yourself as your own individual case study.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with trying a fad diet. There's nothing wrong with trying maybe a more phasic approach. But what is wrong is if you're not present while trying it. So be skeptical and try to be very introspective, and then try to control for variables to your best ability, and then you'll find autonomy and freedom.
Cool. Awesome. That's all I got.
Yeah, that's it. So again, just to rehash real quick, you're going into a big discussion at a holiday with relatives about
Yeah.
politics, who to vote for.
Oh, God.
Go in a way that appeals to the other individual. Try to find something that they may like. From there, ask questions. Get them talking about why they believe that their idea is correct. Ask more questions, ask more questions, ask more questions. Wait until they ask you what you believe. From there, answer without emotion, answer direct,
Yeah.
and then also question what you're saying at the same time.
Yeah. And what I believe, kind of adding on to that to finish up, respond without emotion. Does that mean like change in tone of voice, name calling, like stuff like that? Like what do you mean by
So don't let your endorphins lead you to saying words that
you'll regret.
that don't actually help. If you start with the thought of I want to help this person, then you'll be more likely to not name call.
Yeah.
And also remember, like for me, I know there's so many things that I've changed my mind on over the years. if I had someone that name called me when I was not correct in my thinking, maybe I'd still be thinking those things.
Yeah.
And maybe I wouldn't be helping as many people that I am now.
Yeah. Because then it turns into, oh, I don't like that person called me that name, versus it takes the whole purpose of the conversation on a specific topic to now I don't like that person as a person because they called me.
Yeah, and that's the political stage now.
Yeah.
One party, I mean, you the nicknames, Sleepy Joe.
Yeah.
The other one is Orange Man, weird.
Yeah.
Communist, greedy narcissist.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's no progress.
Yeah.
And what you'll notice in that landscape is people are doubling and tripling down in directions that are probably both wrong.
Yeah.
In that case, I don't necessarily believe compromise is the correct solution, but I also believe pushing further apart is probably getting further from the truth at the same token.
I agree.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.